Millionaire is mocked for falling in love with a homeless man. However, everyone was shocked when they discovered he was the Beth Morrison stared at her reflection in the ballroom's gilded mirror, her emerald green dress sparkling under the crystal chandeliers of the Grand Ashbrook Hotel. Her 29th birthday party was everything she hadn't wanted. Extravagant, showy, and filled with Connecticut's elite who'd rather gossip about her than celebrate with her. "Smile, darling," Maxwell Richardson III whispered in her ear, his hand gripping her waist possessively. "Everyone who matters in Ashbrook is here tonight." His perfectly tailored tuxedo and carefully styled hair screamed old money, just like everything else about him. Beth forced a polite smile, remembering her late father's words. "In business, Beth, sometimes the hardest deals are the ones we make with ourselves." 2 years after losing her parents in that terrible plane crash, those words haunted her more than ever. As CEO of Morrison Technologies, she knew what everyone expected. A marriage merging two of New England's most powerful families. The Morrison-Richardson alliance would create an empire. That's what Max kept telling the board members anyway. "Ladies and gentlemen," Max's voice boomed through the microphone, making Beth jump. This wasn't part of the planned evening. "I have a very special announcement." The crowd of 300 guests turned their attention to them. Beth's stomach churned as Max pulled her to the center of the ballroom. 2 years ago, this amazing woman took control of Morrison Technologies after the tragic loss of her parents. Some doubted whether a 27-year-old could handle such responsibility. He paused, letting his words sink in. "But I never doubted her, or her need for proper guidance." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Beth felt her cheeks burn as she caught snippets of conversation. "Too young? Needs a man's help? Lucky to have Max." That's why tonight, on her 29th birthday, I'm not just celebrating Beth Morrison, the CEO. Max reached into his pocket, dropping to one knee. The crowd gasped. Beth's heart stopped. "I'm asking Beth Morrison to become my wife." He opened a velvet box, revealing a massive diamond ring that screamed more corporate merger than true love. Beth stood frozen, camera flashes blinding her as photographers captured the moment. "Max," she whispered, "we never discussed this." "Say yes, darling," he murmured through his camera-ready smile. "Don't embarrass us both." From the corner of her eye, Beth saw Sarah Chen, her supposed best friend and board member, nodding enthusiastically. The crowd started chanting, "Say yes! Say yes!" Beth's vision blurred. The faces around her morphed into a sea of predatory smiles. She heard snippets of conversation. Finally, someone to keep her in check. The little girl needed this. Maxwell Richardson will make Morrison Technologies great again. The room spun. Beth stepped back, her heel catching on her dress. I can't breathe." "Beth, darling, don't make a scene," Max hissed, reaching for her hand. She yanked away, nearly stumbling. "I need air." Beth turned and fled, ignoring Max's calls and the dramatic gasps of the guests. She ran through the hotel's marble corridors, past startled staff members, out into the cold Connecticut night. The first drops of rain hit her face as she reached her Mercedes. Her trembling hands fumbled with the keys as laughter drifted from the ballroom's open windows. "Did you see her run? Like a scared little girl. Maxwell deserves better anyway." Inside her car, Beth finally broke down. Mascara-stained tears rolled down her cheeks as rain pounded against the windshield. Her foes repeatedly, Max, Sarah, board members, all demanding explanations. She stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her perfectly styled hair was coming undone, her expensive makeup streaking down her face. 2 years of trying to prove herself, of trying to honor her parents' legacy, and this was how the world saw her. A little girl playing dress-up, desperate for a man to take control. The rain grew heavier, matching her tears. Thunder rolled across the sky as Beth Morrison, worth millions on paper but feeling worthless inside, sat alone in her luxury car, wondering if she'd ever find someone who would see her for who she really was, not just the fortune she represented. Little did she know, destiny was about to answer that question in the most unexpected way. Thunder crackled across the Ashbrook sky as Beth wiped her tears, trying to collect herself. She needed to drive home, but the rain was coming down in sheets now. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from Max and the party guests. "Just breathe," she told herself, starting the car. The hotel's driveway was almost empty now, most guests having moved inside to gossip about her dramatic exit. She pulled out slowly, her headlights barely cutting through the downpour. 2 blocks from the hotel, Beth noticed a car swerving erratically behind her. The vehicle's headlights flashed, getting closer and closer. She gripped her steering wheel tighter, heart pounding. The car suddenly accelerated, pulling alongside her. Beth caught a glimpse of the driver, clearly intoxicated, probably coming from another party. Before she could react, the car veered sharply toward her. Beth jerked her wheel, but her tires lost traction on the wet road. Her Mercedes spun, jumping the curb toward a storefront. She screamed, bracing for impact. Suddenly, someone yanked her door open and pulled her out. Beth felt herself being thrown clear of the car just as it crashed into the building. The impact was deafening. She landed on something soft, someone. Rolling over, Beth found herself face to face with a man in worn clothes, now soaked from the rain and scraped from their fall. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Before Beth could answer, her car's gas tank ruptured. Flames erupted despite the rain. The man quickly pulled her farther from the wreckage. "I'm okay," Beth managed, shaking, "but you're bleeding." The stranger touched his forehead, wincing at the gash there. "It's nothing." Sirens wailed in the distance. A small crowd had gathered, phones recording everything. Beth recognized some party guests among them, whispering and pointing. "The ambulance is coming," Beth said. "You need medical attention." "I'm fine," the man insisted, already backing away. "Please," Beth grabbed his arm. "You saved my life. At least let me make sure you're okay." He hesitated, then nodded reluctantly as paramedics arrived. The next hour passed in a blur of emergency vehicles, police questions, and medical checks. Beth learned her rescuer's name was James, but he wouldn't give a last name. At the hospital, Max burst into the emergency room, followed by Sarah and several board members. "Darling, are you all right?" Max rushed to Beth's side, cameras flashing behind him. Someone had tipped off the press. "When I heard about the crash." "I'm fine." Beth cut him off, looking past him to where James sat getting stitches. "Thanks to him." Max glanced dismissively at James. Yes, we'll send him a reward. Now about tonight." "No rewards," James spoke up. "I don't want anything." Max scoffed. "Everyone wants something. Name your price." "Max," Beth snapped. "He saved my life." "And we're grateful," Max lowered his voice. "But let's be realistic about who we're dealing with here." James stood up, ignoring the nurse's protests. "I'm done here." "Wait," Beth called after him. "Please let me help somehow." James turned back, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment, Beth saw something in them. Wisdom, pain, and something else she couldn't name. "If you want to help," he said quietly, "help someone else who needs it. Pass it forward." With that, he walked out into the rain, leaving Beth staring after him. Something about his words, his dignity in the face of Max's condescension, struck her deeply. "Good riddance," Max muttered. "Now about the engagement." "Not now, Max," Beth said firmly, still watching the door James had disappeared through. For the first time since her parents' death, she felt something spark inside her. A curiosity, a need to understand. Who was this man who'd risked his life for a stranger and wanted nothing in return? She didn't know it yet, but that question would change her life forever. 3 days after the accident, Beth couldn't get James out of her mind. She'd searched every homeless shelter in Ashbrook, driven through downtown countless times, but found no trace of him. "You're obsessing," Sarah said during their lunch at Morrison Technologies. "The board is worried about you. First the engagement disaster, now this fixation with a homeless man." "He saved my life, Sarah. I just want to thank him properly." Sarah leaned forward. "Max is willing to overlook your behavior at the party. Don't ruin it by creating another scandal." Beth stood up. "I have to go." "Where? You have a board meeting in an hour." "I'll be back in time." Beth drove to the last shelter on her list, St. Michael's Haven. Inside, she found an older woman organizing donations. "I'm looking for someone," Beth said. "His name is James. He helped me during the storm." The woman smiled. "Ah, James, he comes and goes. Usually here in the mornings for coffee." Beth returned the next morning with 2 cups of coffee. She found James sitting alone, reading a worn book. "Mind if I join you?" James looked up, surprised. "Miss Morrison, you shouldn't be here." "Please call me Beth." She offered him coffee. "I wanted to thank you properly." "No thanks necessary," but he accepted the coffee. Beth glanced at his book, The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. Her surprise must have shown. "Not what you expected?" James asked. "I studied that in business school. It's complex. The principles are simple enough. Wealth without ethics is meaningless." Their conversation flowed naturally. James's knowledge of economics and business ethics amazed her. He spoke about market dynamics and corporate responsibility with deeper understanding than most of her board members. "How do you know all this?" James's expression closed off. "Life teaches you things if you pay attention." Before Beth could probe further, her phone buzzed. Max had sent a detective to follow her. "Is something wrong?" James asked. "No, Beth hesitated. "Would you meet me again to talk?" James studied her. "You're engaged to a powerful man. Being seen with me could cause problems. I'm not engaged, and I don't care about problems." Over the next 2 weeks, Beth visited James regularly. They discussed books, philosophy, and life. He never spoke about his past, but his insights helped her see her company's potential beyond profit margins. One morning, Beth arrived to find James teaching a young homeless man to read. "Everyone deserves a second chance," he explained later. "Sometimes they just need someone to believe in them." "Like you believe in them?" "Like your parents believed in their workers." Beth stared at him. "How do you know about my parents?" James looked away. "Everyone knows about the Morrisons." That evening, Max confronted Beth in her office. "I have proof you're meeting him." He threw photos on her desk. "What are you thinking? You're having me followed?" "I'm protecting you. The board agrees you're becoming unstable." "Get out, Beth. Get out." After Max left, Sarah rushed in. "What happened?" Max looked furious. "He's having me followed. Did you know?" Sarah's hesitation said everything. "You did know. You're spying for him." "We're worried about you, Beth. These visits to shelters, talking to homeless men, it's not like you." "Maybe it's exactly like me. Maybe you never knew me at all." That night, Beth couldn't sleep. James's knowledge of her parents bothered her. There was more to him than he was sharing. But every time she looked into his eyes, she saw only truth and kindness. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Max. "Board meeting tomorrow. Last chance to fix this." Beth turned off her phone. For the first time in years, she felt alive, questioning everything she'd accepted as normal. A homeless man with profound wisdom was teaching her more about life and business than all her Ivy League professors combined. Tomorrow would bring consequences, but tonight, Beth Morrison finally felt like herself. Little did she know, tomorrow would change everything. Beth arrived at Morrison Technologies for the board meeting to find reporters swarming the entrance. Someone had leaked the photos of her visits with James. "Miss Morrison, is it true you're having a mental breakdown? Are you throwing away your engagement for a homeless man? Did your parents' death trigger this behavior?" Security cleared a path for her. Inside, Sarah waited by the elevator. "Social media is exploding," Sarah said, showing Beth her phone. "These photos are everywhere." The images showed Beth and James at the shelter, talking, laughing. The captions were cruel. "Morrison heiress loses grip on reality." And "From boardroom to breadline, Beth Morrison's fall from grace." "The board is waiting," Sarah said quietly. Beth entered the boardroom. 12 stern faces turned to her. Max sat at the far end, looking satisfied. "Miss Morrison," Chairman Wilson began, "we've called this emergency meeting to address concerns about your recent behavior." "My behavior?" Beth straightened. "You mean showing basic human kindness?" "We mean engaging in activities that risk our company's reputation." Max cut in. "Our stock has dropped 15% since these photos leaked." "Who leaked them, Max? You?" "The source doesn't matter. What matters is fixing this mess." Chairman Wilson cleared his throat. "We're proposing a temporary leave of absence for your own good." "You can't do that. I own controlling shares." "Actually," Max smiled, "according to company bylaws, the board can force a temporary removal if the CEO shows signs of mental instability." Beth turned to Sarah. "Did you know about this?" Sarah wouldn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry, Beth. We're trying to help you. By betraying me, I trusted you." "Beth, please," Sarah stepped forward. "After your parents died, you changed. Now these visits to homeless shelters, rejecting Max's proposal, we're worried." "Save it." Beth faced the board. "You want to remove me? Fine. But first, explain why our CFO approved suspicious transfers to offshore accounts last month." The room went silent. Beth pulled out documents from her briefcase. I've been doing my own investigation. Interesting payments to shell companies owned by board members' relatives. Should we discuss those? Max's smile vanished. Chairman Wilson tugged at his collar. Perhaps we're being hasty, Wilson said. A short break might. Beth's phone buzzed. A message from St. Michael's Haven. James is gone, left this morning, asked us to tell you not to look for him. Her heart sank, but she kept her composure. Here's what's going to happen. Beth addressed the board. I'm taking a 1-week vacation. When I return, I want resignations from anyone involved in these suspicious transfers. And Max? Yes, darling? I'm officially rejecting your proposal, in writing, for the record. She walked out, leaving chaos behind. In the lobby, Sarah caught up to her. Beth, wait, the transfers, did you tell anyone else? Why? Worried about your secret account in the Caymans? Sarah paled. How did you? My father taught me to trust my instincts. I never trusted Max, so I watched everything he and his allies did, including you. We can explain. Save it for the SEC. Outside, reporters shouted questions. Beth faced them directly. Yes, I visit homeless shelters. Yes, I rejected an engagement based on business, not love. And yes, I'm investigating financial irregularities at Morrison Technologies. Print that. She drove straight to St. Michael's Haven, but James was gone. His few possessions, the Warren economics books, everything, vanished. He left this for you, the shelter worker handed her a note. Some things are worth more than money. Some people are worth more than reputations. Thank you for reminding me what kindness looks like. But now you need to focus on your fight. Beth clutched the note, fighting tears. In one morning, she'd lost her best friend, her board's support, and James. But for the first time, she felt strong. Her phone rang, a blocked number. Hello? Miss Morrison, an unfamiliar voice said, I have information about James Winchester III and about what really happened to your parents' plane. Beth's world stopped. Who is this? A friend, and it's time you learned the truth. Meet me at Riverside Park in 20 minutes, the mysterious caller said. Come alone. Beth found a woman waiting on a bench, dressed in business attire. She stood as Beth approached. Catherine Winchester, she introduced herself, former fiancée of James Winchester III. Beth's mind raced. Winchester, one of America's largest family corporations. Their CEO's son had vanished 5 years ago, presumed dead. James Winchester is dead, Beth said. Is he? Catherine smiled. Tall man, speaks like a professor, reads economics books, won't accept charity. Beth sat down. Why are you telling me this? Because James is in danger, and so are you. Catherine handed Beth a file. Your parents? Plane crash wasn't an accident. What? Inside were maintenance records, flight plans, and emails. Beth's hands shook as she read. Someone tampered with the plane, Catherine explained. The same people who forced James into hiding. Why would anyone? Your father and James discovered something. A massive fraud scheme involving both our companies. James tried to expose it, but they threatened his family, so he disappeared. And my parents? They kept investigating. The crash was a warning to others. Beth felt sick. Max, the offshore accounts. Just the tip of the iceberg. Max Richardson was involved from the start. I need proof. Check your father's old office. There's a hidden safe behind the painting of New York Harbor. The combination is your birth date. How do you know all this? James told me before he vanished. I've been protecting his secret, waiting for the right moment. Why now? Because you made him care again, and that makes him vulnerable. Beth's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Emergency board meeting called. Vote to remove you permanently. 1 hour. Max is making his move, Catherine said. Go to your father's office, find the proof. I'll try to locate James. Beth raced to Morrison Technologies. The building was nearly empty, Sunday morning. She entered her father's untouched office, heart pounding. The painting hung there, New York Harbor at sunset. Behind it, just as Catherine said, was a safe. Beth's birth date clicked it open. Inside, she found a USB drive and letters between her father and James Winchester III, documenting everything. Fraud, bribery, murder. Looking for something, Beth spun around. Sarah stood in the doorway. The board meeting's a trap, Sarah said. Max knows about the safe. He sent me to stop you. And are you going to? Sarah closed the door. No, I was wrong about everything. About you, Max. All of it. I'm sorry. Why should I trust you? Because I have proof too. Sarah pulled out her phone. Recordings of Max planning the whole thing, even discussing your parents' crash. Why didn't you come forward? Fear. But not anymore. Suddenly, the office door burst open. 2 security guards entered, followed by Max. Beth, he sighed. Breaking into offices on Sunday? The board will love hearing about this. It's my building, Max. Not for long. He noticed the open safe. Find anything interesting? Just the truth. About you, the crash, everything. Max's smile vanished. Give me the drive. No, he nodded to the guards. Get it. Stop. Sarah raised her phone. I'm recording everything. Sarah, Max warned. Think carefully about what you're doing. I have copies of everything, Sarah said. One wrong move and it all goes public. A new voice spoke from the doorway. That won't be necessary. Everyone turned. James stood there, no longer in shabby clothes but in a business suit. Next to him was Catherine Winchester. Hello, Max, James said. Remember me? Max's face went white. You're dead. Sorry to disappoint. Now, call off your guards or the FBI agents downstairs will do it for you. Beth stared at James, the homeless man who'd saved her life, the missing heir who'd helped expose the truth. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. You needed to find the truth yourself, James said. Just like I did 5 years ago. Max lunged for the USB drive. Beth pulled away. In the chaos, no one noticed Sarah pressing send on her phone. The truth was out. There was no going back now. FBI agents swarmed the office as Max tried to delete files from his phone. Too late. Sarah's recordings were already spreading across social media. Maxwell Richardson, an agent announced, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and suspected involvement in the deaths of Robert and Emily Morrison. As they led Max away, he shouted back at Beth. You think this is over? The Richardsons still control half your board. James touched Beth's shoulder. He's right. This isn't over. Mr. Winchester, another agent approached. We need your official statement about the events 5 years ago. Of course. James turned to Beth. There's more you need to know. In the conference room, James revealed the full story. Your father and I discovered the fraud scheme together. The Richardsons were working with corrupt officials to win government contracts. Why didn't you come to me earlier? Beth asked. They threatened my family. My disappearance was the only way to protect them while gathering evidence. Then your parents. Catherine interrupted, rushing in. Turn on the news. On the screen, Richardson board members were holding an emergency press conference. Beth Morrison is mentally unfit to lead, one declared. Her relationship with a homeless man who we now learn was perpetrating a fraud of his own. They're spinning it, Sarah said, making you both look unstable. Beth's phone exploded with messages, investors pulling out, stock prices plummeting, partners canceling contracts. We need to respond, Catherine said. James, it's time. James nodded. I'll hold my own press conference, reveal everything. It's too dangerous, Beth protested. 5 years ago, I ran to protect others. Not this time. Suddenly, the lights went out. Security alarms blared. Someone's breached the building. Sarah checked her phone. They've shut down all systems. The evidence, Beth realized. They're after the servers. James was already moving. Where's your server room? Basement. But the elevators. Show me the stairs. They raced down emergency-lit stairwells. Ahead, they heard voices and footsteps. Richardson's security team, Catherine whispered. They'll destroy everything. Not if I can help it, Sarah pulled out her phone. I'm still connected to the backup generator. Give me 1 minute. The lights flickered back on. Alarms changed tone. What did you do? Beth asked. Activated the fire systems. They'll have to evacuate. But when they reached the server room, they found Max's head of security already there, downloading files. Stop, Beth shouted. The man drew a gun. Miss Morrison, Mr. Winchester, how convenient. Think carefully, James said calmly. FBI's upstairs. You really want to add murder charges? Better than prison for what we've done. Sarah's voice came over the intercom. FBI team to basement level. Armed suspect. The man panicked, firing a shot that hit a server. Sparks flew. James tackled him as Beth grabbed the download drive. FBI agents poured in, securing the scene. The evidence was safe. Outside, reporters gathered as James finally faced the cameras. 5 years ago, I discovered criminal activities that reached into the highest levels of corporate America. Today, that evidence comes to light. Beth stood beside him as he revealed everything. The fraud, the threats, the cover-ups. His testimony implicated dozens of executives and officials. "Why come forward now?" a reporter asked. James looked at Beth. "Because someone reminded me that running from the truth isn't the same as protecting it." But even as they spoke across town, Max sat in his cell, making one phone call. "Release everything," he ordered. "All of it. If I'm going down, they're coming with me." The real war was just beginning, and somewhere in Boston, an elderly man watched the news coverage, picked up his phone, and dialed. "Hello, son," Howard Winchester said. "It's time we talked." The call from Howard Winchester changed everything. James sat in Beth's office, phone clutched tight, face pale. "My father wants to meet," he said. "Says he can prove Max ordered your parents' crash." "It could be a trap," Catherine warned. "No," James shook his head. "He's scared. The FBI's closing in and he wants to deal." Beth touched his hand. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. For your parents. For the truth." The meeting was set for the Winchester estate in Boston. As their car approached the mansion, James grew tense. 5 years, he muttered. "Last time I was here, I found the documents that made me run." Inside, Howard Winchester waited in his study. Age had bent his tall frame, but his eyes were sharp. "James," he said, voice cracking. "Son." "Save it," James replied. "You said you have proof." Howard unlocked a safe, removing a recording device. "Max Richardson came here the day before the Morrison crash. Listen." The recording played. Max's voice filled the room. "The Morrisons won't back down. We need to send a message. Yes, make it look like an accident. After they're gone, their daughter will be easier to control." Beth grabbed James's arm, steadying herself. "Why didn't you come forward?" James demanded. "They threatened you," Howard's voice broke. "Said if I revealed anything, you'd be next. I'd already lost your mother. I couldn't lose you too." "So you let innocent people die?" "I was a coward," Howard admitted, "but when I saw you on TV yesterday standing up for the truth, I knew it was time." Suddenly, Sarah called Beth's phone. "Turn on the news, now." On Howard's TV, Max Richardson was giving a press conference. From jail. "James Winchester is a fraud," Max declared. "He and Beth Morrison orchestrated this whole scheme. I have proof they falsified evidence. And Beth Morrison? Ask her about the real reason her parents' company was failing before their convenient death." "He's lying," Beth exploded. "It gets worse," Sarah said. "The board just voted. They're removing you as CEO." "They can't. They had enough votes. Max's people pushed it through. You have 1 hour to clear out your office." James faced his father. "Will you testify? Tell everyone what Max really did?" "Son, if I do that..." "People died, Dad. Beth's parents died." Howard stood straighter. "You're right, I'll do it." They raced back to Morrison Technologies. Reporters swarmed the entrance. "Miss Morrison, did you fake evidence against Max Richardson? Mr. Winchester, were you ever really homeless? Is this a corporate takeover attempt?" Inside, security guards were changing locks on Beth's office. "Stop!" Sarah ran up. "I found something. The board vote wasn't legal. 3 members were coerced. I have proof." "From where?" "Max's personal files. Remember when he tried deleting everything? I recovered it all." Beth's phone rang. An FBI agent. "Miss Morrison, we found irregularities in the crash investigation. The inspector who ruled it an accident was on Richardson's payroll. We need to go public," James said. "All of it, now." "Wait," Howard called from behind them. They turned to see him walking up, supported by Catherine. "I'll go first," he said. "America needs to hear a father admit his failures. Then I'll tell them everything about Max Richardson." Beth faced the board members gathering in the lobby. "You want to remove me? Fine. But first, listen to what Howard Winchester has to say." She nodded to the reporters' cameras. Howard stepped forward, tears in his eyes. 5 years ago, I chose cowardice over truth. Today, I choose justice. Max Richardson murdered Robert and Emily Morrison, and I can prove it." The lobby erupted in chaos. But Beth wasn't watching the reporters. She watched James, seeing the weight lift from his shoulders as his father finally chose truth over fear. The price of truth was high, but its reward was freedom. The courthouse buzzed with tension on the first day of trial. Every major network covered what they called the corporate crime of the century. Max Richardson sat with his legal team, still projecting confidence. Beth, James, and Howard Winchester waited with the prosecution. "All rise." The bailiff called as Judge Harriet Collins entered. Max's lawyer opened aggressively. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a story of corporate revenge. James Winchester, bitter over his family disputes, conspired with Beth Morrison to destroy innocent lives. He played edited video clips showing James's years on the street. Does this look like a responsible corporate heir, or a man planning revenge? The prosecution countered with Howard Winchester. Mr. Winchester, the prosecutor began, tell us about the day Max Richardson discussed the Morrison plane crash. Objection. Max's lawyer jumped up. Hearsay. Overruled. The witness may answer. Howard's testimony silenced the courtroom. He played the recording, explained the threats, and revealed documents proving the conspiracy. Then came the surprise. The prosecution calls Catherine Winchester. Catherine walked to the stand. Max's face tightened. Miss Winchester, what happened the night before James Winchester disappeared? I found Max in James's office planting false documents. Objection. This witness is biased. I have proof. Catherine held up her phone. I recorded everything. The video played. Max clearly visible, placing files in James's desk, muttering about taking care of the Winchester problem. Max leaped up. That's a fake. Mr. Richardson, Judge Collins warned, sit down. During recess, Max's lawyer approached Beth. My client would like to make a deal. No deals, Beth said. He'll confess to fraud but maintain the crash was an accident. The truth, James stepped forward. All of it or nothing. Back in session, Sarah took the stand. She revealed years of Max's financial crimes, backed by recovered files. The final piece, Sarah explained, was controlling Morrison Technologies through Beth. When she resisted marriage, Max activated his backup plan, which was destroying her reputation and taking control of the company. Max's lawyer tried discrediting each witness. He painted James as mentally unstable, Beth as naive, Howard as senile. Then came the maintenance worker. Mr. Lopez, the prosecutor asked, who paid you to tamper with the Morrisons' plane? Mr. Richardson promised my sick daughter treatment at his hospital. And after the crash? He denied everything. My daughter died waiting for care he promised. The jury was visibly moved. Max's confidence cracked. During the final recess, Max made one last move. A juror reported he'd tried making contact, offering bribes. Judge Collins exploded. Mr. Richardson, you've added jury tampering to your charges. Max stood up. This is all a lie. Winchester and Morrison orchestrated everything. They. Your Honor, Max's lawyer interrupted. My client wishes to change his plea. The courtroom held its breath. To what? Guilty. To all charges. Cameras flashed. Reporters rushed out. Beth gripped James's hand. Why? Max's lawyer asked his client. Max glared at Beth and James. Prison's better than watching them win. The verdict was swift. Max Richardson guilty on all counts, including murder, minimum 50 years. Outside, reporters mobbed Beth and James. How does it feel to have justice? Will Winchester Enterprises merge with Morrison Technologies? Are the wedding rumors true? James faced the cameras. Today isn't about corporate mergers. It's about truth, about standing up to power that thinks it's above the law. Beth added, my parents believed in honest business, in helping people. That legacy continues. Howard stepped forward, putting his arm around his son for the first time in 5 years. And the Winchester family, he announced, will make amends for its past failures. Later, alone in Beth's office, James held her. What now? She asked. Now, he smiled, we rebuild. The right way. But in his prison cell, Max Richardson made one last call. Release the final files, he ordered. Let's see how they handle the truth about Howard Winchester's wife. The battle was won. But the war wasn't over. The morning after Max's conviction, Howard Winchester's phone rang during breakfast with James and Beth. Turn on the news, Catherine's voice shook. Now. On TV, a reporter stood outside the courthouse. Breaking news about the Winchester Morrison case. Documents reveal Howard Winchester's wife didn't die of cancer as claimed. Sources suggest she discovered the original fraud scheme and was silenced. Howard dropped his coffee cup. No. Dad? James stared at his father. What is she talking about? Son, I can explain. Did you know? James's voice hardened. Did you know what happened to Mom? I found out after. Max threatened to reveal everything if I talked. Beth touched James's arm. James, wait. He pulled away. You let me believe she died of cancer. For 20 years. I was trying to protect you. Like you protected the Morrisons? James stood up. More lies. Always more lies. The doorbell rang. FBI agents entered with a warrant. Mr. Winchester, one said, we need you to come with us. James watched them lead his father away. Beth tried to reach for him, but he walked out. At Morrison Technologies, Sarah waited with more news. Max tried to bribe a guard to release more files. They stopped him, but what? He's offering to reveal everything about James's mother in exchange for a reduced sentence. Beth found James at St. Michael's Haven, sitting in their old spot. Going back to hiding? She asked. Thinking about truth, he replied. What it costs, what it's worth. Your father made mistakes. He let a murderer walk free. Let me believe lies about my own mother. To protect you. That's not protection, that's cowardice. Beth sat beside him. Then be braver. Face him. Learn the whole truth. At the FBI office, Howard sat in interrogation. James entered alone. Tell me everything, he demanded. No more protection. No more lies. Howard nodded slowly. Your mother found documents about illegal testing at Richardson Pharmaceuticals. People died. She threatened to expose everything. And? Max arranged an accident. I discovered the truth after. He said if I talked, you'd be next. So you hid behind a cancer story? I made a deal with the devil to keep you safe. Howard's voice broke. I've regretted it every day since. James leaned forward. Did she suffer? No, it was quick. Outside, Beth waited with Catherine and Sarah. James emerged, eyes red. What do you need? Beth asked. Justice. Real justice this time. They drove to the prison. Max smirked when they entered. Come to make a deal? James placed a phone on the table. No, came to play you a recording. He pressed play. Howard's full confession about Max's crimes, including detailed evidence about James's mother's death. Max's smirk vanished. Where did you get that? Dad's been recording everything since Mom died. Insurance. The judge already sentenced me. Double jeopardy. This is a new crime, Beth said. A new trial. With a grieving son testifying, Catherine added. Good luck with the jury. Max lunged for the phone. Guards restrained him. You're done, James stood. No deals, no mercy. Outside, reporters waited. Mr. Winchester, will you testify about your mother's murder? James faced the cameras. My mother died seeking the truth. Today, the truth finally wins. Beth took his hand. Together? He squeezed back. Together. At Morrison Technologies, Sarah had news. The board reviewed everything. They want to make an announcement. In the boardroom, Chairman Wilson stood. In light of recent events, we're announcing a complete restructuring. Beth Morrison will retain full control, with James Winchester joining as co-CEO. Their first act? The Morrison-Winchester Truth in Business Initiative. Howard watched the announcement from his cell, tears streaming. That's my boy, he whispered, finally doing it right. The truth had cost them all, but its price was worth paying. 3 months after Howard's confession, Morrison-Winchester Technologies launched. The merger made headlines across the country. Corporate America's redemption story. Beth and James stood together at the opening ceremony. Today marks a new chapter, Beth announced. The Morrison-Winchester Second Chance Foundation will dedicate half our profits to helping homeless Americans rebuild their lives. Inside the newly renovated St. Michael's Haven, now the foundation's first success story, former residents trained for jobs at the company. Each person here deserves a chance, James told reporters, just like someone once gave me. Catherine arrived with unexpected news. The governor called. He's reviewing your father's case. The evidence about your mother, his cooperation, they might reduce his sentence. James tensed. How long? Maybe 5 years instead of 20. Beth watched James process this. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about second chances. At the prison, Howard looked older, grayer. The foundation's first project, James told him. Helping people rebuild, like you taught me during those shelter visits. I never helped anyone, Howard said. I just ran. You helped me. Every day I was homeless, remembering your lessons about business ethics kept me going. Son, about your mother. I know why you lied. I don't forgive you yet. But maybe with time. Howard nodded, understanding. Back at headquarters, Sarah coordinated with former shelter residents. These people know struggle, she told Beth. They'll make sure our help reaches those who need it most. Like this couple, Beth pointed to an application. Lost everything in medical debt? Remind you of anyone? Sarah smiled. James would approve. The foundation's first month exceeded expectations. 50 former homeless individuals employed. 20 families in new homes. 5 small businesses launched. This is real change, Catherine said, reviewing the numbers. Not just corporate PR. Then came another surprise. Max's ex-wife contacted them. I found something in our old house, she said, handing over a file. Max's original plans. It wasn't just about money. He wanted to destroy both your families completely. Why tell us now? Because you're doing what my ex-husband never did, using power to help people. The file revealed more names, more conspirators. But this time, they were ready. Send it to the FBI, James decided. Let justice work. That evening, Beth found James at their old spot in the shelter's garden. Having second thoughts? She asked. About the foundation? Never. About Dad. Time heals. Mom always said that. He smiled sadly. She'd like what we're building. The shelter's new training center buzzed with activity. Former residents learned computer skills, traded business ideas, rebuilt lives. Your father made mistakes, Beth said, but he raised a son who remembers to look back and help others up. James watched a former homeless veteran teaching coding classes. When I was on the streets, he said, I promised myself if I ever got another chance, I'd make it count. Sarah interrupted with news. The Richardson assets are being liquidated. Courts want to know if we're interested in the hospital. The one where the maintenance worker's daughter died? Yes, it's failing, but buy it, James and Beth said together. First project for the new facility? Beth asked. Free care for families in need, James nodded. Mom would definitely like that. The press praised the hospital acquisition. Corporate raiders turned philanthropists, read one headline, but they weren't doing it for headlines. In his cell, Max watched the news coverage and finally understood. He'd spent his life gathering wealth and power, while Beth and James built something rarer: legacy and trust. Howard wrote his son a letter. You found a better way to protect people, by empowering them. Your mother would be proud. Maybe someday, you'll be proud of your father too. The foundation grew, lives changed, futures rebuilt. And in the garden where it all began, two people who'd found each other despite every obstacle planned a future bigger than themselves. But that's another story. St. Michael's Haven buzzed with wedding preparations, not at a grand hotel or country club, but at the shelter where their story began. The press thinks we're crazy, Beth said, helping volunteers set up chairs. A billionaire couple getting married at a homeless shelter. Let them talk, James smiled. This place means more than any fancy venue. Former shelter residents worked alongside corporate executives, transforming the garden into a wedding space. The story had captured America's heart, the heiress and the homeless man who turned out to be her perfect match. Sarah burst in with news. Beth, you need to see this. In Beth's makeshift bridal room, the doctor confirmed it. Twins. 2 months along, he said. Everything looks perfect. Beth touched her stomach, tears forming. James doesn't know yet. Know what? James appeared in the doorway. I'll give you two a moment, the doctor smiled, leaving. You're going to be a father, Beth said. Twins. James sat down hard. Twins? Is that okay? He pulled her close. It's perfect. Mom was a twin. I never told you. A knock interrupted them. Catherine entered with Howard's letter. They're allowing him to watch the ceremony via video link, she said, and he sent this. James read aloud, Son, I'll spend my life trying to deserve the family you've built. Your mother would be so proud of the man you've become. All my love, Dad. He's trying, Beth said softly. I know. James folded the letter carefully. That's why I asked the governor to let him attend in person, under guard. Beth hugged him. When? He'll be here in an hour. 1 day release. The news energized the shelter. Everyone worked faster, knowing the family would be complete. Howard arrived in an orange jumpsuit, escorted by guards. He froze when he saw James in his tuxedo. You look just like I did, Howard said, when I married your mother. I remember the pictures. James, Not today, Dad. James straightened his father's borrowed tie. Today we're just family. The ceremony was simple but powerful. Shelter residents filled the seats alongside corporate leaders and social workers. The media called it the wedding that bridged two worlds. Beth walked down the aisle alone, honoring her parents' memory. But when she reached the front, she paused. Howard, she called. Will you join me? Howard, with guards' permission, stood beside her. Tears rolled down his face as he took her arm. Thank you, he whispered. Daughter. During the vows, James's voice shook. I was lost when I found you. Not just homeless, but hopeless. You saw me, the real me, and now? He touched her stomach gently. Now we're building a future I never dreamed possible. Beth's vows drew tears from even the guards. "You saved my life twice, once from an accident and once from a life without real love. Our children will know your story, all of it. The courage, the sacrifice, the redemption." After the ceremony, Howard had one last surprise. "Your mother's ring," he said, pulling out a simple gold band. "She'd want you to have it for Beth." "Dad, I kept it safe all these years, waiting for you to find someone worthy." The guards allowed a brief hug before leading Howard away. The reception was a unique blend of worlds: gourmet food served alongside shelter staples, CEOs dancing with former homeless veterans, society photographers mingling with shelter volunteers. "This is what change looks like," Sarah observed. "Real change." Late that night, after most guests left, Beth and James sat in their old spot in the garden. "Ready for our next adventure?" Beth asked, touching her stomach. "With you? Always." Inside, shelter residents celebrated with leftover wedding cake. Outside, the media dubbed it the wedding of the century. But for Beth and James, it was simply love winning against all odds. And in his cell, Howard Winchester slept peacefully for the first time in 20 years. His son's forgiveness, the best wedding gift of all. 1 year later, snow fell softly on St. Michael's Haven as Christmas preparations filled the transformed shelter. Beth watched from the window, one sleeping twin in her arms while James cradled the other. "Hard to believe it's been a year," she said, rocking little Emily gently. James smiled down at Robert, named after Beth's father. "Sometimes I still wake up thinking I'm back on these streets." The shelter, now a nationwide model for rehabilitation centers, buzzed with holiday activity. Former residents returned to share success stories and help new arrivals. The Morrison Winchester Second Chance Foundation had expanded to 15 cities, helping thousands rebuild their lives. Sarah entered with their annual report. "You need to see these numbers." The foundation had exceeded every goal. 5,000 homeless individuals employed, 2,000 families housed, 1,500 small businesses launched. The hospital, renamed the Amanda Winchester Memorial Hospital after James's mother, provided free care to over 10,000 families. "Max would hate this," Sarah said, checking her phone. "Speaking of which, he's requesting another appeal." "Let him," James replied. "We have better things to focus on." Those better things included Howard's early release hearing, scheduled for after New Year's. His exemplary behavior and continued cooperation with authorities had accelerated the process. Catherine arrived with more news. "The president wants to recognize the foundation's work. They're calling it a new model for corporate responsibility." Beth handed Emily to Sarah. "Tell them we'll accept on one condition. The ceremony happens here at the shelter." The White House agreed. A week later, news crews captured a unique scene. The President of the United States visiting a homeless shelter, celebrating a program that proved the American dream was still alive. "This is what America stands for," the President declared. "Not just success, but the chance to rebuild. Not just wealth, but the wisdom to use it well." During the ceremony, James noticed a familiar face, the maintenance worker whose testimony had helped convict Max. Now he ran the foundation's job training program. "Your daughter would be proud," James told him. "She is," the man smiled. "I feel her every time we help another family." The foundation's success sparked a national movement. Other corporations followed their model, creating their own rehabilitation programs. The press dubbed it the Winchester Effect, proving that profit and purpose could coexist. Max watched it all from prison, serving his extended sentence after the revelations about James's mother. His empire dismantled, his name disgraced, he finally wrote a letter to Beth and James. "You built something I never could. Not because I lacked money or power, but because I lacked humanity. Your parents, all of them, would be proud." Howard's release came on a cold January morning. He walked out of prison to find James waiting. "The twins want to meet their grandfather," James said simply. At Beth and James's home, Howard held his grandchildren for the first time. When Emily grabbed his finger with her tiny hand, the last walls around his heart crumbled. "I'll spend every day earning this," he promised. "We know, Dad," Beth said, touching his shoulder. "That's what second chances are for." The Morrison-Winchester empire grew differently than Max had envisioned. Instead of towering skyscrapers, they built community centers. Instead of offshore accounts, they created scholarship funds. Their board meetings included former homeless individuals alongside executives. "This is real power," Beth told a graduating class of foundation trainees. "Not what you own, but what you give back." Spring brought another transformation. St. Michael's Haven expanded, adding a daycare center for working parents. The garden where Beth and James first connected became a teaching space for urban farming. Sarah, now running daily operations, had her own news. "I'm engaged to that lawyer who helped with Howard's case. Love finds us in unexpected places," Beth smiled, remembering a rainy night and a brave stranger. The twins grew, surrounded by an extended family that transcended blood ties. Shelter residents became aunts and uncles, successful foundation graduates returned as mentors, and Howard discovered his true calling, teaching business ethics to foundation students. On the anniversary of Amanda Winchester's death, James visited her grave with his father and children. "She would love them," Howard said softly. "Tell them about her," James replied. "All of it. The truth sets us free." Back at the foundation's headquarters, Beth reviewed plans for international expansion. The Morrison-Winchester model was going global, proving that compassion could be both profitable and transformative. "You know what Max never understood?" Beth told James that night. "True wealth isn't in bank accounts, it's in the lives we touch." Mom used to say something similar, James remembered. She said, "Success without service is just selfishness dressed in silk." The year ended with a Christmas celebration at St. Michael's Haven. Hundreds gathered, foundation graduates, current residents, corporate partners, and family. The twins, now walking, toddled among guests who represented every level of society. Howard, watching his grandchildren, turned to his son. "Your mother once dreamed of changing the world. You and Beth actually did it." "No," James corrected him. "We just proved it's possible. The real change happens one life at a time." Beth joined them, carrying a sleeping Emily. "Ready to share the news?" James nodded. Earlier that day, they'd finalized plans for their biggest project yet, a nationwide network of rehabilitation centers, each offering the complete Morrison-Winchester program of housing, healthcare, job training, and support. "The true American dream," Beth addressed the gathering, "isn't about getting rich, it's about enriching lives. It's not about climbing to the top, but about reaching back to help others up." As snow fell outside, the shelter filled with hope and purpose. Former enemies became allies in a greater cause, past wounds healed through service to others. Love proved stronger than greed, and truth more powerful than deception. Beth and James held their children, surrounded by their unlikely extended family. They had built something rare and precious, a legacy of second chances, a testament to love's power to transform lives. In his cell, Max Richardson read about their success and finally understood. In trying to control everything, he had lost what mattered most. Beth and James, in letting go of control and choosing love, had gained everything. Howard, watching his son's family, remembered Amanda's words, "Life's greatest wealth is in the hearts we touch." The American dream hadn't died. It had evolved, becoming something deeper and truer than mere material success. Through the foundation, thousands found not just help but hope, not just jobs but purpose, not just houses but homes. And it all began with a simple act of kindness on a rainy night, proving that love truly sees beyond appearances. As another Christmas at St. Michael's Haven drew to a close, Beth and James gathered everyone for a final announcement. "Today, we're launching something new," Beth began. "The Morrison-Winchester Legacy Program." James continued, "Every child born to a family in our shelters will receive a full scholarship, education, housing, healthcare. Everything they need to break the cycle of poverty." The room erupted in applause. Howard stepped forward. "And I'm dedicating my fortune to match every scholarship," he announced. It's time Winchester money served a higher purpose. In prison, Max received news of the legacy program. For the first time, he wrote a sincere letter. "Dear Beth and James, your success haunted me until I finally understood. You're not just helping people, you're changing the definition of success itself. I spent my life building walls while you built bridges. Perhaps that's why you sleep peacefully while I count days in this cell. The money I tried to steal now serves a greater purpose than I ever imagined. Your parents, Robert, Emily, and Amanda, they saw something I was too blind to see. True wealth lies in the lives we transform. I don't seek forgiveness. I only want you to know that even here, in this darkness, your light reaches. The guard's daughter received one of your scholarships, he told me with tears in his eyes. That's when I finally understood what real power means. Max. Beth and James read the letter together in their garden. The twins played nearby, watched by Howard as he taught foundation students. Should we respond? Beth asked. Already did, James smiled. Sent him updates about every life the foundation changes. Real redemption starts with facing the truth. The foundation's influence continued growing. International leaders studied their model, universities taught their methods. But for Beth and James, success remained personal, measured in individual smiles, restored dignity, renewed hope. Sarah and her lawyer husband expanded the legal aid program, helping families navigate the system that once seemed stacked against them. Catherine led global expansion, bringing the foundation's methods to struggling communities worldwide. One day, a familiar face appeared at the shelter. The drunk driver who'd nearly killed Beth that rainy night. Sober now, seeking redemption. I've been afraid to come, he admitted, but I heard about second chances here. James remembered his own journey. Welcome home. The driver became one of their most dedicated volunteers, proof that transformation knows no bounds. Years passed. The twins grew into teenagers who understood both privilege and purpose. They spent summers working at the shelter, winters delivering meals to the homeless, learning firsthand the lessons their parents lived. Howard, now fully embraced by his family, dedicated his final years to teaching ethics in business schools nationwide. His course, The Price of Truth, became mandatory at top universities. On the 10th anniversary of the foundation, they held a reunion. Thousands came, families rebuilt, lives transformed, dreams restored. Each person carried a story of change, a testament to the power of looking beyond appearances. The president declared National Second Chance Day, inspired by their work. But for Beth and James, the real victory wasn't in recognition. It was in the quiet moments. A family finding home, a child starting school, a parent finding purpose. Max served his full sentence, devoting his prison time to helping inmates prepare for release. Upon leaving prison, he declined interviews and publicity, instead quietly volunteering at a foundation shelter in another state. The Morrison-Winchester legacy grew beyond business or charity. It became a movement, proving that capitalism could have a conscience, that profit and purpose could dance together, that love could transform not just hearts, but systems. And it all began with a simple choice: to see beyond surface appearances, to believe in second chances, to trust that love could bridge any divide. As Beth and James watched their expanded family, biological and chosen, celebrate another Christmas at St. Michael's Haven, they knew they'd found something greater than the American dream. They'd discovered the American promise, that every life has value, every soul deserves dignity, and every heart holds the potential for transformation. It was a promise they would keep passing forward, one life at a time, proving that true love's vision sees far beyond appearances, reaching into the very heart of what makes us human. In the end, their story wasn't just about a wealthy woman and a homeless man finding love. It was about America finding its heart again, one second chance at a time. And that was just the beginning. My dear friends, if this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if you were Beth or James? Tell me about a time when someone gave you a second chance, or when you looked beyond appearances to find true love. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us that love, faith, and courage can transform any life. Remember, sometimes angels appear as homeless strangers, and true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch.